Welcome back to Unlocked here. And we are diving headfirst into my hunt from this past fall, where I was fortunate enough to take what I believe is my second biggest deer of all time, and probably in memory it might go down as my most favorite hunt ever.
It's one of the coolest I've seen in a while. That I know.
Yeah, the aspects to it, I think for me, growing up in the Southeast, calling is probably the least effective strategy that exists down there. And so growing up in the Southeast and watching countless hunting shows and monster bucks, this and that, about these guys in the Midwest that have success with calling, I've always wanted to do it. And over the course of the last 5 years living here in Iowa, I've started to figure it out a little bit. And this was what I would say is my first ever successful harvest due to calling, and it's special. That's
cool.
Pretty neat. Yep.
Yeah. It played out perfectly.
And how old do you think this buck was?
I believe he'd be 5.
Yeah, so I see this with guys calling, like typically you call and you get a lot of younger bucks first. And so, growing up, watching the outdoor industry, now going back and watching, it's like they're rattling in a lot of 3.5-year-old bucks.
Absolutely.
And so it's not something that you frequently see a mature buck fall victim to rattling.
Yeah, for sure.
And I love the fact that we're getting to watch it because it tells a lot about the understanding of how to create a scenario to rattle and still get a mature buck to fall victim to it.
Yeah.
And he reacted like a mature buck. Cutting downwind, taking
Absolutely.
the cover. It was not like he just blew into the scene, looking,
Absolutely.
Blowing
looking
smoke
for a
out of
fight.
his nose.
Never even stepped out in the open.
No.
Never even
He
thought
knew what he
about
was
it.
doing.
So with that in mind, Max, let's go to OnX and walk us through why you picked this selection, because there's a lot of fingers here, and you got water cutting basically this piece in half. So I'm anxious to see why you dropped it there, because I see a lot of opportunities in this part of the farm.
For sure. So the parcel is give or take 100 acres, more or less, of permission piece. So this would be my second full season. I got it really 2.5 seasons. So I got it in like late October and ended up tagging out 3 years ago on a different piece. So other than running cameras, had almost no experience prior to year before last. So it's a property that, as you can see, it kind of looks from OnX maps here, it looks like potentially a lot of set aside, but it's almost all tillable. I mean, I'd say 70% of this place is tillable, and what timber you do see, as you can see from the contour lines, very, very, very steep and just disgusting gullies. I mean, impassable.
A lot of erosion.
I mean, very quick elevation changes in a short period of distance. So not really, unfortunately, not a lot of bedding. The property also, as you can tell, it's very tough hunting. You've got pretty much the ag here in the middle that your deer spend most of the time in, kind of right there in that little star hub. Deer don't venture very far out until after dark, as you could assume.
So you're saying the reveal was a huge part of this.
Trail cameras were massive in this. And running them for now the 3 years actually made a big difference. You start to see and develop those patterns of,
for sure,
which of these coves is hot. This specific year I was fortunate enough to harvest this deer before the corn was ever out, but especially in prior years watching ag come out and see what these deer do on an open field, a lot of different things. So doesn't hunt very well either on anything out of the west, which is a really good wind that you need. So the days that I decide to dive in are, unfortunately, they're kind of mediocre condition days, and so that's another reason why I believe trail camera is so important. It's that those mediocre days that I consider more or less high risk, I have a little bit more confidence going forward with, recent trail cam data.
And that's an important thing to note. Of course, you're going to hunt wherever you have access to, but not every single piece is created equal. Like 100%. Just because you're in Iowa doesn't mean that this is easy.
Yep.
And most people try and put the square peg in the round hole. It's like this thing sets up well for what you've already identified as kind of what would seem as off days. And most people would go and do the opposite, and they'd force the issue on the really good days because they know that deer are going to move.
Yep.
But they'll do more harm than good.
Absolutely, yeah. And I've seen that, over the course of time going in here. And so the neighbor has most of what I consider the big bedding here to the east, where you see that big flat top over there, some really nice stuff in there. And the neighbor actually has become an acquaintance of mine and does some pretty strict management. So he's got it going on over there. We've got a great relationship of sharing trail cameras, which, as you all know, is all landowners sitting here. It's super important. It's just very relieving to have good neighbors. So
You can't. Matt and I talk about this a lot. You can do everything right if you own this piece and you're pouring everything you got into habitat management, and it's still in a bad neighborhood. Can wreck the whole system.
You're fighting a losing
you
battle.
can take a good permission piece and put it in a good neighborhood and get to experience incredible hunting.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, so on this specific day, one thing, after the first fall of getting it, so the spring of 2 seasons ago, Spencer and I went in and made 2 small bedding cuts on these 2 little knobs that you can see here. And what the goal in mind is that we try to at least, even if we didn't have what you'd call mature bucks to bed there, I just wanted to at least have a little bit, be a little more in the game. And even if I'm just having a couple of doe groups hang out a little bit to where they're not coming from 800 yards away on the neighbors. Fortunately, on this piece, I have the food. On a bean year, I have the food until the beans are moved. And on a corn year, it only gets better. You know, when they first cut that corn, it's unbelievable. Deer coming out of the woodwork that you've never seen. But I don't love that they don't stay on me. And so we went in, it's very simple. I mean, we're talking about over the course of a weekend, you know, a couple of 6 to 8 hour days with a chainsaw and some gas. Very, very, very inexpensive habitat improvements on these 2 little knobs, knowing
Low expense, high return.
absolutely. And I noticed immediately we did those cuts in that early March, maybe even late February that year, and just put a couple cameras, and immediately the doe group stuck right in there, which was awesome. And so this particular hunt, I would say, was one of the first times I knew of like a mature buck bedding in there, and trail cameras fortunately told me that. But the bedding cuts, this is pretty cool for me to be able to do something so simple with just a little bit of sweat equity and a chainsaw and actually have it reap
What were the
major
conversations
awards.
with the landowner in that, and going, can I do this? You know, because cutting trees
Most
is,
people are like, whoa, hey,
Yeah.
Yep.
and so it's like probably like, hey, don't
push
cut
your
my
luck,
oaks.
Bucky.
I don't believe if this would have been some very pure timber with potentially investment opportunity or with return on his investment, I don't think the conversation would have been the same. But especially in these 2 locations, there's an old little bit of a dried up kind of pond there, and it gets steep so fast that this timber, the only thing you could do is just clear cut it all, but you're never going to be able to plant those side hills. And so it was 2 places that we were able to agree upon.
Yeah.
Hey, if I did a little, I mean, we're talking very, very, very small,
Mm-hmm.
eighth of an acre cuts.
Yeah.
You know,
Gotcha.
very, very small. And we're talking about cutting, you know,
And you're cutting
20, 30
garbage
trees?
type trees
Absolutely.
where
Shingle oak, cedar,
Absolutely, absolutely.
mix.
trees that are never going to be of value,
Yep,
and you're
absolutely.
ultimately doing really aggressive TSI and going.
Yep.
The landowner's not out any current or future
Yep.
income,
Yep.
and you are creating a healthier forest,
Yep.
and you're making secure bedding.
Yep. Absolutely. And I've seen over time deer come out and using the cove to the north and also that cove to the south. They kind of walk that one of those ditches out and bring it up to that middle cove there. So I knew that there was deer were comfortable in there already, and so I just figured, especially as we get later toward that October pre-rut and even rut, if I could just have a couple of doe groups just stay
That's
on
right.
me, stay just
That's right.
come
Huge.
off that food and just
Yep.
stay on me, that there I knew eventually whether or not a buck bed there, that's out of my control.
He's at
Doesn't
least
matter
gonna
as
check
long
it.
as there's does there.
100%.
You know, I don't care where a buck beds in late
100%.
October, November. I just care where the does
Yeah.
bed, because that's
Yeah.
where the bucks are going to be.
They're going to scent check it at some point.
Yeah,
So,
absolutely.
Great
Max,
play.
I assume your access point was from the south?
That's right. That's correct. Yeah, and
Okay.
it was a mighty of a walk because with the corn still in, we came from a good ways. And so
That's a
this
bear.
is another one that we've talked about. This is a hanging hunt, something I do with having a decent amount of permission. I do almost regularly, almost religiously. Am I doing hanging hunts? I just can't afford to furnish all these farms with these sets.
It sounds
I've gotten pretty good
miserable.
at it.
As a man who
100%.
has done hanging hunts with camera gear, that is the worst. The only thing to make it worse is self-filming.
Yeah.
If you have to do all of it yourself, then it's horrible.
And thankfully, I was not self-filming here. That we had Spencer here next to me, but it was a long walk with a decent. Me being a professional in this is what I do. I'm a producer. I'm a videographer. I don't go in light. If I'm going to do it, I'm going to do it right. I got multiple angles, tree arms, so we got quite the array of gear, but got set up pretty quick. I'll preface that by saying we got a late morning picture of this deer who I have zero history with, not from years prior or even this year. So I got a late morning picture on a camera pretty close to one of these bedding cuts, and just had this gut feeling that, later in the morning, still probably even pre-rut. We're talking in the early 20s or even late teens of October. I had assumed he was on a little journey to go check out some doe groups, see what's out there on a neighboring piece, and decided to stay out a little bit too late, probably for his own good, and got his picture taken. What I only assumed was him headed in to lay down, at least for the middle part of the day. So preface that by saying we got his picture and decided, unfortunately, with a northeast wind, not a lot of plays with him. I would so much rather let him work out in the field that evening and hunt him on a southerly wind, out somewhere in one of these coves, but didn't have that opportunity. And with a deer I didn't know and history on the farm, I didn't feel like he would stick around very long.
Sure.
So.
What time did you get into the set, Max? Do you remember?
Yeah, we went in pretty early. I'd say it's that 2 to, we were definitely set and ready by 3 o'clock, knowing that little kind of a warmer afternoon, even not a great condition day as we talked about, kind of feeling late movement, but still wanted to be in there nice and tight. And when I'm going in on these hanging hunts, especially knowing, a line distance, we're talking, I'm getting in within 100 yards, I believe, of where this deer laid down. So I'm creeping in very, very cautiously, and I'm going in early.
Well, that's what's cool is, like, it might be a warm day, but with the intel of that deer's probably did bed down in there, you can be a little bit aggressive, and you need to be to push the envelope.
Yeah.
I love the calculated risk of you were able to make that decision based on the intel, based on the work that you did, correlate that with weather, and it's like, no, it's now it's the time to put the pressure on.
Yeah, and people that know, my career field being in the hunting industry on the videography production side, I get very, very, very busy as soon as the hunting picks up.
Sure. Yep.
So people that know me, and I get aggressive early. I just feel like my window of a deer that's potentially uneducated that early in the season, he hasn't maybe been bumped yet, unpressured, I tend to go in hard after him, knowing that my odds are good and my time is dwindling.
Yeah.
So
now this was what, like the 25th of October?
I don't even. I believe it was toward the 20th.
20th.
Mm-hmm. So still, like I said, probably still in that pre-rut. They may. I've seen it before. We've all seen it. They make those little random journeys.
Yep.
Got his picture taken and decided to make the setup. And so knowing that, if you look at this, there's no reason for this deer to come south to me. Really, no reason. So the rattling horns were taken in a grunt call on purpose.
I'll say you knew going into it you were going to probably be in a calling scenario.
I was going to give it as long as I could to where we're running out of potentially good light. And then if I hadn't seen them or hadn't had any luck, I was going to have to try it. A random deer, I feel like there was a chance. And so I got set up. And another cool thing is that I've started to learn about calling is on this specific hunt, you can see the horns I brought in. They're absolutely dank. So when we're talking 2-year-old sheds.
Yeah, so you're more sparring than you are trying to kill each other.
And if you can watch through the footage there, a couple of soft grunts in a sequence and more or less tickled these tiny little horns together. It was not a knockdown, drag
that
out.
was a Georgia buck rattling. That's right.
Especially
mature
to a random
Georgia
deer. And so when I did this sequence, the first deer you see here in the footage is this little spike here.
Yep.
That popped out. He popped out of this southerly one, which is crazy because I bet he was laid down
tight.
50 yards.
Yeah.
So very close. He
and
popped
the wind
out.
is northwest, you say?
Northeast.
Yeah,
Northeast.
kind of
Okay.
Probably at the time it was probably almost straight out of the north, and so that deer came out of that more northerly cut. From what I imagine, made a ton of noise. It's just really cool about the footage. It was a calmer afternoon. You guys have seen it. He's crashing all over in there, trying to get to me. Yeah. Fortunately, having that little deer, that smaller, 1.5-year-old buck out there, just west of me and just a little bit north, was in a perfect location, and you can watch that little deer's demeanor change instantly.
He
when
knew
he caught a little bit of wind of a deer, likely more mature, and so it was game on well before I even made eye contact or saw anything about this deer. And surely enough, like we talked about earlier, never revealed himself into that field, not even close. He was 25 yards off the field in that timber, and I just happened to have a lane on a roadbed that
which is
worked out.
A classic mistake that people make when you set up on a field like that. Oh, we're going to sit on the field. Mature deer don't just, they're not 5 years old being stupid, and they're not going to walk out through there. So you're rattling. He's trying to scent check you.
And you look at that
it's not
ditch,
the path of least resistance,
100%.
but he's going to take it because it's the path of survival.
Yep. If you look at my setup straight south of me with a little bit of east, it's a 60, 70-foot elevation change. So the odds of him going downwind that steep below me, I thought we're not great. There's a
Right.
chance that if he's gonna make himself known, it's gonna be in bow range.
Yep.
It sounds to me like you had a strong gut feeling. You trusted that gut. You played off of it based on that intel, and you made some gutsy calls, but it was all calculated,
Yeah,
and
for
it
sure.
paid off in a really cool way.
You know, the thing that now watching the footage and now seeing the topo on X, you're literally on a ridge or a lip
Oh yeah.
because it drops real hard, real
Oh yeah.
fast,
60 feet. Yeah.
right past your set.
Mm-hmm.
So you put that there knowing that lip was there, which
Yeah.
would then push him towards you instead of away from you.
Absolutely.
Yeah. If
Yeah.
he wants to go downwind, he's going to have to get close.
If you're gonna
Yeah,
call, you better
exactly.
have a plan for when. It's not if he goes downwind; it is when he wants or when he tries to go downwind. You better have a plan.
And this is a great strategy because you're downwind of the dense cover. Like we write plans for clients across the country where it's like, if you're going to hunt close to bedding, be on the downwind side.
Mm-hmm.
And so you're set up for that. The only thing that you're happening to attract him with the rattling is because there's not a big food source
Yeah,
to the south. So
correct.
you're like,
He's not
I
naturally
can't.
headed that way.
Yeah,
he's
correct.
naturally going to go a different direction. So you're like, I have to entice him with something else.
Piqued that
Absolutely.
curiosity, and what I love about that footage is like he came in and acted just like a mature buck,
Yeah.
and gave up a shot opportunity and made a good shot, and I love the hunt.
Oh, I think
love the
there's,
breakdown.
I think there's several things here that obviously Max's intel of the farm and doing some of the cuts prior to, but without that ridge being just to the east of him, doesn't push him to Max.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's probably the biggest takeaway that I'm seeing from this is he played the topo perfectly, and without that, I don't think Max is shooting him with a PSE.
I'll
That deer
do
was
a-
swung
yeah,
way
100%.
wider.
A caveat to
Yeah,
that is
because he rattled at him. He came to him on that, so he's
Yeah.
trying to get downwind of him.
Right.
He can't because of this
forced.
ridge. He's forced to. So without that being element, I'm not sure Max tips him over.
My
Max
caveat
may not,
to
may
that
not
is
even
going,
seen them too.
if you haven't
took a
done the
wide one.
bedding cuts, though, if you
Yeah.
haven't done that
No,
work,
there's multiple
All of
things
it.
here.
yeah,
all
yeah.
of it.
There's
You
multiple
gotta,
things.
You gotta. It's
You
all
gotta
the
piece the
layers. You got to
puzzles.
put them all together.
Right, but he did the work, but
Yeah.
the tree stand location is so critical because of the topo.
Yep.
If he moves 30, 40 yards to the west, he's out.
Yeah. If you move north 100 yards, you're going to blow out that other cut.
Exactly. That's
Yeah.
why it's so important that use all the tools that Onyx provides, play it to your advantage, and he set it up perfectly. And obviously,
Yeah.
the PSE tipped him over.
You can be a good habitat manager and not kill deer. You can be
Yeah.
a good hunter and not have to worry about habitat management. But if you can do habitat management and have woodsmanship, that's when you get to see a true level of success. Very few people can really.
It's a prime example of connecting multiple dots for success, and
Yeah.
Max nailed it to the
Nailed it.
absolute
Great job.
T. Yeah.
Nailed it.
Yeah, appreciate it.
All right, guys, we hope you enjoyed the content here on the Unlock series. But if you're looking for more or you want to see this hunt unfold, be sure to go to the Hunt Collective series here on the YouTube channel and hit that subscribe button. We've got a lot of content coming your way. We appreciate your support.